Hello and welcome to the Tai Chi Notebook Podcast. My name is Graham Barlow and I've been practicing Tai Chi and Xing Yi for over 25 years now. I've also got a first degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This time I'm joined by a friend of mine from Beijing, China. Byron Jacobs is a teacher of Xing Yi and Bagua, as well as being a BJJ practitioner and competitor. He's a student of the famous Shifu Di Guoyong and is heavily involved in the martial arts scene in Beijing. Byron runs his own podcast, the Drunken Boxing Podcast, as well as offering online tuition in martial arts through his online learning platform. See the show notes for details. In this wide-ranging discussion, we talk about training Xing Yi, Bagua, and whether Wu Shu will ever be in the Olympics. We also find out what it's like to train martial arts in Beijing during the coronavirus pandemic, and what the Chinese BJJ and MMA scene is like. So, let's get deeper under the skin of Beijing martial arts and find out what's really going on. Hi Byron, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. I have trained Jiu-Jitsu already today, so I'm feeling quite energetic and
good.
In fact, every time I do a podcast, it's normally I've just trained Jiu-Jitsu, so I don't know what that's about.
Are you training in the mornings or teaching in the mornings, or what's going on there?
Yeah, so my teacher goes back home. Although actually he's from England, but he's kind of Italian, and he goes back to Italy for for all of August, and gets the senior people to help him out teaching classes. So I've been doing morning classes. Okay. Which has been good. Really enjoy it. Like teaching.
I prefer training in the morning. I just feel like, get it done in the morning, and the rest of the day is ahead of me.
Yeah. Yeah, I do find though that I then need a little sleep sometime in the afternoon, but that's probably just my age.
Okay. Who is your teacher? He lives between Italy and where you are now, or he just goes back?
So he lives in Bath in the UK. He's called Salvatore Pace, or Pace. Is that how it's spelled? But he's Italian, and he still has family in Italy, so he kind of goes to stay with them every August.
Well, I would too. Nice. I think summer in Italy must be nice. So yeah.
Yeah, it's Sicily, in fact.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah, proper old school Sicilian.
Yeah, I've been there many times. I've been to Sicily, to Catania many times. So yeah.
Yeah.
Good food down there.
Yeah. So you, however, are in Beijing.
Yes.
How's the weather there today?
Hot. I mean, it's usually like technically we're just entering autumn now. Technically, but it's like the ass end of summer, and the ass end of summer is, it's still really hot and humid. It's muggy. It's like sticky and hot and uncomfortable. So that's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Damon tells me all stories about training in Beijing in the summer and how hot it was, and taking big cartons of water with you basically, and just stopping every 20 minutes to down an entire one because it was just so unbearable.
Look, you get used to it to a degree. I don't drink while I train. Even though we're training outside, I don't drink while I train. It's just something I've kind of given myself a strong habit. I don't drink while I'm training. But wow. You do take like 3 t-shirts because you will sweat through them. So yeah. So that's usually my thing.
So talking about training, so you're training in all sorts of things at the moment, but you've got this sort of background in traditional Chinese arts, and you've been doing some of the more modern things like jiu-jitsu. So do you want to just give us an overview of everything that you're doing at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I mean, what my staples are, as has been for the majority of my life, has been Chinese martial arts. So I would say that the core of what I practice is Xing Yi Quan, and that's the same as my teacher's core. I mean, my teacher, although he's known for Xing Yi and Bagua, his core has always been Xing Yi. Xing Yi was what he did with his first teacher, and what he did from a younger age. And so a lot of his base and core is Xing Yi, and then of course when he was a bit older, he started to train with Li Ziming and did Liang style Bagua. So when I started training with him, which is, well, it's over a decade now. So, I had already been doing other Chinese martial arts before that. I'd done some traditional Chinese martial arts, and then moved into sports, the sports stuff of Chinese Wu Shu and Sanda. It was just, I was young and it was, appealing at that point. But then at about, I would say my mid-20s, I just wanted to focus on traditional Chinese martial arts. And I'd always been drawn to Xing Yi Quan. So, I sought my teacher out to specifically do Xing Yi with him, but I wasn't gonna dictate to him. You know what I mean? It was like, how you want to teach and what sequence you want to teach me is up to you. But it just so goes that he makes the foundation very much Xing Yi Quan and will teach Bagua on top of it. Now that doesn't mean, like, there are people that would come in and train with him from overseas specifically because they wanted to do Bagua, and he's not going to say no. But for me, I really wanted to follow the same process he went through, and I also found from my experience, and some people might get upset with what I'm about to say, I found that if you do, and I've seen it, unfortunately, if you go directly to Bagua without any martial basis, it's a lot harder for people to develop the engine that drives the body work and the power and the movements. So I found, from what I've seen as well with myself, that the Bagua came a lot easier because of my basis in Xing Yi. So that's always been the core of my training. And
yeah, that's exactly what Damon always says to me about. He says just think of Bagua as advanced Xing Yi. So like you want to do Xing Yi first, and then you've got the engine going, and then you can do the complicated stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also kind of in line with how Dong Hai Chuan taught his students anyway. Most of them had some basis in something. They were already proficient in some martial arts, so it wasn't like he was trying to teach them basic motor skills. They already had a good foundational basis in that, so it was just focusing on other things. And I've seen it as well. I mean, like I said, I've seen guys and people that came in and had no martial arts basis, and they just did Bagua because that was what interested them. And frankly speaking, I never saw them develop the whole body power that is required for both of these arts. Some people don't want to admit that Xing Yi and Bagua are more similar than they actually are, but they are quite similar in terms of those aspects of body mechanics and whole body power. It's just other aspects that they're quite different, but in general the core is very similar. Yeah.
So that's the basis of your martial art is the Xing Yi.
Yeah.
What was your teacher's name again?
My Xing Yi teacher, Di Guoyong.
Yeah.
Di Guoyong.
Yeah.
Di Guoyong. Yeah. So his teacher was Zhao Zhong. Zhao Zhong was Liu Huapu's student. Liu Huapu was Shang Yunqiang's student. So it's classified as Shang style Xing Yi Quan. So Hebei Shang style Xing Yi Quan. But I mean, I don't run around trying to say Shang style Xing Yi Quan. It's just, if I'm going to classify it, it's Hebei Xing Yi. So that's basically what it is. And he also studied. He studied actually with Wu Binlo as well, who was a good friend of his teacher, but much later on. Wu Binlo was quite a well-known Chuojiao Fanzi teacher here in Beijing. Probably the most well-known of the last 100 years. And my teacher wanted to learn a little bit of the Chuojiao, not so much the Fanzi, but it's a combined system. Chuojiao Fanzi has got Chuojiao sets and Fanzi sets. It's quite a big system. But my teacher wanted to learn more of the Chuojiao because of the intricate footwork, the kicking, etc.
Yes. Yeah. I know it's got a reputation for kicks.
Yeah. So he did that too, and then later on he focused on Bagua with Li Ziming, and he was one of his he was in his first group of disciples. So yeah, so it's an interesting background. I didn't study any of my teachers' Chuojiao because I had a background in long fist, so I had been kicking and doing all that stuff since I was a kid. And I just not something that appealed to me. I just wanted to do Xing Yi and Bagua in any case. So.
And you've now started offering some online instruction as well, haven't you? In Xing Yi
Yeah,
and Bagua? Yeah.
I started to put together an online learning program. So it's kind of something that anybody could study from. So there's a library of videos, and each video obviously has a specific topic. The way I'm presenting it though and moving through with it is sequentially. So you can follow the sequence and you'll see it's a progressive manner that things are being presented. but once you're in the system, you have access to everything. So, it's also useful for people that already study, because they could go back and look at whatever and add it on. Some of the stuff are more advanced, some of the stuff are basic, but the idea is to get people, if they follow it sequentially, that they'll be able to develop through the system as you should be if you were training in person, as much as possible through the format, So
yeah, you've put a few free instructionals out as well, haven't you? And I've always been really impressed with the sort of the quality of your video production as well as the quality of the martial arts you're teaching. But it just looks really nice. You've got really good editing. You spent a lot. You've obviously thought about everything, and you spent a lot of time on angles and repetitions and all the details you'd need if you actually wanted to learn it, which is nice.
Well, I mean, I could honestly say, and it's gonna sound, maybe some people think I'm just trying to blow hot air up my teacher's ass, but a lot of his teaching method is very, very, it's very refined in terms of theory. He explains things very well because he's sat and thought about these problems for a long time. And it's something that I kind of picked up from him, but also because of my work. I was actually a technical manager for the International Wu Shu Federation. My job was writing teaching materials, doing things like that, writing rule books. If you're writing sports rules, they're almost legal jargon to a degree. They have to be put in that format that they're almost legal, and all of those things kind of influenced the way that I put together teaching materials, because I always had the same issues. I always had problems with stuff that you'd see, whether it be from international federations or private individuals presenting, whether it's teaching materials written or video, that I would always run into problems with learning, like from an angle, from an explanation, from the language being used. So looking at those and remembering the problems and the questions that I had would help me formulate things that I would do better. So yeah, there's that. My teacher has I remember the first day I went to train with him, and I arrived there with my, training shirt and a bag and a little towel and, my training shoes and an extra t-shirt, and he looks at me and he says, "Do you have a pen?" And I was like, no. I thought, "Do you have a pen and a notebook?" I said, "No." He said, "Next time bring a pen and a notebook with you." And he's pretty pedantic about that. He's like, he'll explain something to you, but he expects you to write it down. And and I said to him, "No, don't worry, I'll remember it." He said, yeah, but remember, the pen remembers better than your brain. And that's a habit that I picked up from him too. So writing things out, the act of writing it out, I found actually cements it in your brain. So actually it's not so much that you're gonna go back and look at it, although you probably have use for that too, but the act of actually writing it down makes you think about how to word it, which makes you understand it better, which cements it in your brain. So it's
true. My teacher at school always told me that as well. Just made us copy things out, and I'd kind of go, "Why are we just copying it out? We could just read it." The actual act of writing it somehow makes you remember it.
Yes.
And also, even when you go back years later and I read stuff like training notes I've written, as I read them, I remember the actual moment of training. It kind of comes back as a memory, so it's essentially sort of laying little traps that will fire off those memories again years down the line.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, when I look back at the notes I have in my various training manuals, I actually remember the day. Sometimes I'll remember even little things like what we were wearing or the season or what we did afterwards. Kind of all these memories come flying back just from reading what you wrote on that day. So,
so it is useful in even if it's not the way you think it's useful, it's just useful in a different way.
Yeah, completely. So all of those things, and plus my work background, kind of, I've got a specific way that I make these videos, and a specific way that I try to explain things, and I try my best to make it as clear and as precise as possible. So that's what you're seeing there. It's a result of those things.
I'll put all the links to your various online outlets in the notes to go with the podcast. So
thanks.
So we don't have to start saying URLs, because I always hate that
especially
in
YouTube
podcasts.
addresses. YouTube addresses are almost no one's going to remember that anyway.
talking about YouTube, you've got quite a few different outlets there as well, haven't you? You've got Mushin Martial Culture, which is you've also got your Drunken Boxing Podcast. You're all over the place.
Well, it all falls under the same YouTube channel, but it's a few different endeavors. So, yeah, the idea with the YouTube channel was just to start putting. I think the first thing I started with was a 10-minute primer. I decided to make that Sun T-shirt 10-minute primer. And it just kind of went from there. I thought, okay, let me put out some stuff when I have time to restore. I had a bunch of footage from my teacher that he had that I restored. Like this, the first series that I did was this. It's called Jingcheng Wu Shu, which means Beijing's Wu Shu. And it was like quite an old short series on Beijing TV here where they featured a few different teachers. Most of them are dead now. So I restored that and put subtitles in it. And then I just kind of decided to go from there. I thought, oh, well, if I have the time, I might as well do some other things, restore, subtitle some stuff, make my own stuff, and go make some new stuff. Go film some of the guys that are still around if I have time. So I started doing that, and the podcast just kind of came out spontaneously. Marin was in Beijing at some point. We had been in contact, and the idea came. Well, you know what? I want to sit down and talk to this guy. But maybe it's a good idea to record it, and I wanted it to be casual, like two guys drinking, having a drink and having a chat, So that's where the idea for the Drunken Boxing Podcast came. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can't really do this with a beer because it's 11 o'clock my time and afternoon your time.
I don't know.
It's a problem, isn't it?
No, you need to come train with us in Beijing because Baijiu at 11 a.m. is also a thing here. So, no, there's no problem drinking in the middle of the day. What are you talking about?
Well, it's the slippery slope, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Once you start that, where do you stop?
Yeah. Well, the initial idea with the podcast is I wanted to do it in person always because, people feel a little bit more, I don't know, personal when they're sitting in front of you and talking and a bit more relaxed and that was the vibe, but then we had Corona, so that was the end of that.
Exactly. Everything's changed, hasn't it, after the epidemic?
Yeah, so I usually...
And you were sort of in China. You were in China for the actual, the outbreak, weren't you?
Yeah. It was actually quite weird, that whole... it was just before Chinese New Year, actually. So Chinese New Year is a quiet period in Beijing anyway. The reason being is being Beijing, a lot of people that are here for work, they're not originally from Beijing. So you've got two kinds of exoduses that occur over Chinese New Year here in Beijing. It's the people that are migrant, that don't live here and they're working here. Well, they do live here, but they're not from here. They go home. And then a lot of the people that do live here go travel. So if there's an excuse to go or a time to go, they'll go over Chinese New Year. So Beijing is, for me, in Chinese New Year, it's my favorite time of the year because, the subways aren't crowded, it's quiet, it's just peaceful. But that was just before Chinese New Year, and it was pretty sudden that there was this, virus, and then suddenly, boom, everything was like, okay, restrictions, we're closing this.
Yeah, because you locked down, like, way before everyone else over here didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember going downstairs from my apartment building the one day and seeing them starting to erect like cages around the roads in my residential area. Yeah. And I was like, you start to panic because you feel like you're going to be imprisoned, but it's not really about being imprisoned. It's about having one access point and controlling.
I mean, that's way more controlling than what we had over here, and everyone over here freaked out about having to stay indoors for a few weeks, whereas at least they weren't building cages in the street.
Well, you can't go into, like, even you couldn't at that point, like, there's a residential, they cordoned off the area that I live in, which is a very big residential area. They sectioned it off, obviously, and then there was one access point for this area, one access point. So there's one across the street from me, like, and that's a separate residential area, and I couldn't go in there, and they couldn't come into mine. So you can either go into where you live, go out to the supermarkets, etc., and you couldn't go into other people's residential areas. So they were pretty clear on how they managed this, which in some senses I think I think it was a good thing. I think it needed to be done. So, you know, through this, they know who's been in and out of an area. If somebody tests positive, they've got it quite well controlled that they can just close off an area and then test everyone, you know, without having to try figure out the million people that have gone into that area and things like that. So it's in that sense, I think it does work.
Yeah. And so how did that affect your training?
I was still training within my closed off neighborhood. So I've got a spot at the back that I usually go and train at, and I just carried on. So,
but no training with teacher and
no
other students and all that kind of stuff.
No, not until they eased the restrictions and then allowed people to be from outside areas to come in, which was much more recent, like towards the end of last year. You know, they eased it a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was you're also quite active in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well, aren't you?
Yeah. That was quite an interesting. I mean, I don't know if I've spoken about this before. It was probably around 7 years ago, going on to 7 years ago. I had a couple of friends that were expats here in Beijing, and a couple of them were doing they were doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the time. And of course, you know, Xing Yi and Bagua that I was training, Bagua has a lot of takedowns and you know, what you'd consider wrestling. But you know, it's you know, it's one thing to train with your martial arts brothers and you know each other, and it's another thing to go outside of your style and try it on people that are from a different style that you know that you don't know. So that was my original that was my original intention, to go and play with him.
Yeah, so you want to go almost does this work if I do it with other people that aren't you know, part of the scene I'm in. And also and how did you find it?
Well, I mean, also I wanted to understand their methods because I mean, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is renowned for having skill on the floor, so I wanted to taste it, you know. It's the only way you're going to know something is if you taste it, right? So and to be better prepared myself in those situations. And at that time, I could only, I mean, 7 years ago, I don't think there was a huge amount of teachers here at that time. And I found a guy called Chet Quint. Chet Quint was originally from the USA. In fact, he was the first black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to come into China and teach. And that was... he had been here already at that point for over 10 years. And I think initially, I don't know if you had listened to that podcast that I did with a guy called Andy P, who did, he started the Art of War, MMA.
Yeah, I listened to that one, yeah.
And he fought Xu Xiaodong when Xu Xiaodong was still a Sanda athlete. Andy P was actually probably, I think you could consider him the first guy to come to China and teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he was at that time a blue belt when he came from California to China. And Chet was actually contacted and brought in by Andy to come and teach. So there was that was the beginning way back then. Anyway, long story short, I found Chet. Chet is a very competent older school, you know, jiu-jitsu, Gracie lineage. He was a Pedro Sauer black belt, so he was very much. Yeah, he was very much. I mean, he trained with Hickson. Hickson gave him his black belt, if I recall correctly. And so his outlook and his way of teaching was very much focused on do not get yourself killed first. You know, that's basically his methodology. And it was and I found his classes very interesting from that point of view, because he was not just, you know, teaching people to be competitive. He was teaching people to not get killed. I mean, there were classes where you just arrive and he'd be like, all right, you on the bottom, you on the top. You on top, put on gloves, punch him. You on the bottom, try make your jiu-jitsu work while he's punching you in the face. And and I just...
Old school.
yeah, very old school. And I really enjoyed him, the people there, and his methodology. And, you know, I felt that there was a lot of benefit to learning that dimension, because it's a dimension that is missing from Chinese martial arts, which is the floor work, you know. And we can praise our styles for what value and what beauty they have, and they all have their differing strengths and weaknesses. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's strength is on the floor, and it's a weakness in a lot of the other, specifically Chinese martial arts. So I found that hole was a hole I wanted to fill, and I haven't stopped since. So I do that between 3 to 4 times a week, and on top of my other training. So, and I find they work very well together. There's no clash there, you know.
Yes,
no
they're not competing in the same area, are they? So
no.
You've still got the stand-up, area is still the Chinese arts, and then things are on the floor.
Exactly.
And you've got the Brazilian stuff to back it up, haven't you?
Exactly. So they and also there's a transition between the two. For example, with Bagua's locks and takedowns, Xing Yi has certain locks and rudimentary takedowns too, and you could go from one to the other without there being any conflict there. They work very well. So yeah.
So what was your experience like then when you when you kind of got further into jiu-jitsu, and everyone has this experience when they start. They eventually roll with somebody, normally a black belt, who just sort of renders them helpless. I was pretty much rendered helpless by a blue belt when I started, and I just thought, wow, I've got to learn this. This is just amazing.
Yeah.
Did you have one of those sort of moments as well?
Honestly, the first day I went there were a couple of blue belts, one purple belt, and I didn't have such a tough time with a couple of the blue belts. In fact, I mean, from the takedown point of view, I think they were surprised because, and this is just purely from the other styles that I did, and I don't think they knew I had a background in the things that I had a background in. So a lot of them were surprised. But then when I rolled with Chet, it was, you kind of see your life flash before your eyes. So.
Yeah, I know. You have one of those epiphanies, don't you?
And he's not a small. Yeah, he's not a small guy. He's not a small guy. He's an ex-policeman. His job was in security. That's the work that he did here too. His job was in security. So he very quickly showed me another side of things, and I was like, okay, yeah, I really want to learn this. So it was good. It was good.
And then
and he's gone now. I mean,
it becomes addictive though, doesn't it? That you get this sort of buzz off jiu-jitsu that very.
For sure.
I don't know how to describe it really, but it becomes very addictive. And you kind of like, when you haven't gone to train that day, you're sort of sitting at home tapping your fingers, thinking, "Oh, I want to go and train. I want to go and train."
Right.
And then, of course, over the pandemic, presumably you couldn't train at all in jiu-jitsu.
On the record, no, we couldn't. Off the record, we were training. I mean, we would go, like a few of us that were in Beijing, hadn't left Beijing, were staying at home in our residential areas. We weren't like running around. We were people that were secure, had been here for a long time, and there was probably a handful of us, like 9 of us or 8 of us, and we'd go to the gym. There's a curtain. We'd put a bike lock on the door, so if you looked outside, you'd think the place was closed. And we didn't start immediately, though. I mean, there was no way you could have started immediately. But I think it was around July last year that we just decided, okay, well, we're gonna train and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of behind closed door stuff going on in Britain too. I mean, it's hardly a secret. My friend in Poland actually. The armed police turned up at their gym to try and evict them, and they just locked the door until they went away.
Well, that's the thing, yeah? If there's a lock on the door, what are they going to do, really? Are they going to break in? I mean, so... Yeah,
exactly. They're not allowed to break in, but, I think they honestly, it took them a couple of hours to go away, but they just waited them out.
Yeah. Well, we did have one day, I think it was maybe August, September last year, that... the police came in, and I thought, okay, that's it, guys. We're all going to jail.
We're all going to jail.
and then it turns out, no, it wasn't the actual police for like public security or something like that. It was a division of the fire safety inspection. They came to do a fire safety inspection of the place, and I was like, oh
okay.
Thank God.
Yeah. Nothing happening here. Nothing to see.
No. We all kind of, as they came in, we're kind of separated, and we're doing jumping jacks with. Safe,
exactly.
safe distance between each other. So yeah.
Everyone switch to plan B immediately. Start exercising on your own.
Exactly. We had this plan that, if they come in, we're just doing fitness. We're not doing something else. So yeah. And we're having a bit of a spike now again. So we're hoping that they don't close everything up again for some time.
Well, I mean, over here we've reopened, so everything's back to normal. And we had a spike, but it appears to be going down, and no one knows why. So. That's a bit confusing. Everyone's utterly baffled as to why our numbers are going down.
Well, maybe
we just open everything up.
You guys have all been vaccinated. Maybe your vaccination rate.
Yeah. We've all been vaccinated, and the kids are off school because it's some holidays. So that's probably a huge factor.
Yeah. So I mean, we got a similar situation here. A large portion of the people have been vaccinated. So. A spike is just probably certain people and confirmed cases. I don't think there's like a serious sickness issue. It's just some people are getting sick. It's not like people are on the brink of death. So.
Yeah, the vaccination definitely seems to keep the hospital numbers down, which is the main thing. But you were in a competition recently, weren't you?
Yeah.
In jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
How'd you go?
Well, I mean, I've been out of competitive martial arts for more than, I'd say, 15 years. It was the last time I competed. And I used to compete in both aspects. I mean, I used to do forms, I used to do fighting. And it was interesting because the psychological side of things was, it was like I knew what to expect, and I'd been through it, so it never used to bug me before, but it did to a degree. So it's just like rust. I guess you could call it rust.
Yeah.
So I didn't do everything that I had planned, or certain things. I made a couple of mistakes that I should have. Overall, I did fine. I mean, I did pretty well. I'm not young, so I had to. I was in a division younger than I should. Yeah, but even younger than I should have been, because there just were no people at my rank, at my age, that were competing. So
yeah. I've had the same problem. When I've competed, I had to go down 2 age rankings because there was nobody as old as me.
Yeah, so there was that, but that didn't really bug me because I mean I'm training with young lunatics on a daily basis anyway. So, but I'll honestly say that I enjoyed getting back into it. So I'm gonna do it again when the opportunity comes along, simply because of the process of going and putting yourself through it. It's not really the results that I'm really chasing.
Exactly, yeah.
So
yeah, it makes you focus your efforts to one goal, and you get a lot better by doing that.
Well, also it's different having the pressure of somebody who's in there who's actually trying to kill you, which I haven't had that feeling for a long time. So people don't seem to understand this. Okay, you're not doing full out MMA, but the guy is being extremely aggressive and forceful. So it's a good...
Yeah, and if he gets the chance to break something before you tap, he's not going to stop. That's the...
Yeah. Yeah, so it's that I used to do, and it was a feeling that I recalled when I went through it again, that, it kind of tempers you. So it's been a while, and I'll do it when I can, if there's people that want to compete with me, and we'll go through it again. No problem.
Talking about competition, would you say there's a healthy MMA scene that's developed in China now? So you had Zhang Weili, the first UFC champion.
Well, I mean, just taking a look at a couple, these things overlap. Jiu-Jitsu and MMA overlap here in China. Yeah. So there's been a huge burst, and that's why I was mentioning, when I first started training with Chet, it was very hard to find a gym. I think before the pandemic, I think there was something like 30 black belts from Brazil teaching here in Beijing alone. So it's been a huge explosion, and most of those gyms that they teach at are not just like a jiu-jitsu club, They're usually they'll have a guy from Thailand, they'll have an MMA teacher and a guy teaching grappling, and there's people that are entering in MMA. So there's a huge explosion of people. That competition that I entered a couple of months ago, if I recall, they said it was probably the biggest tournament China's ever held. There were over 1,000 people competing. So, I mean...
Oh, wow. That's popular then, isn't it?
It's very popular. I mean, it's becoming very popular here, and of course a lot of those guys overlap and they're cross training, and some of them are getting into to MMA, so it's growing. And part of the reason is, and this again a lot of people don't know, is that the way sport runs in China is the Ministry of Sport allocates different sports to different government bodies, and under the Chinese Wushu Association, certain other sports would fall under them. So if I recall, there was Muay Thai used to fall under them, and maybe a couple of other striking arts would fall under their jurisdiction. So when MMA was trying to come into China, they had to go through the Chinese Wushu Association, and there was just no way that they were going to support it, and this is exactly what happened. I think maybe 15 years ago. I remember one of the old one of my old bosses, to a degree, in the technical side of things from the Chinese Wushu Association. He told me he met with Dana White when Dana White came in and wanted to host the UFC here, and this was a long time ago, and he just flat out said no. He just said no, because you needed sanctioning. You need sanctioning, and he just flat out said no. So they were deliberately not wanting it to grow here. Of course, they had their own Sanda thing that they were trying to promote. I guess they saw it as something that might disrupt that. But as time goes on, you can't block the sun out. In the end, in the end, it just becomes tiring. So it's started and it's growing. From a commercial side, a lot of Sanda athletes here, they're professional in the sense that they're taken and they're professionally trained as Sanda athletes to fight in provincial. There's a healthy sport. I don't even think healthy is the right word. People don't understand that in the West we develop sport from a grassroots level up. I mean, it's usually kids go to school, they get into hobbies, they excel at those hobbies, then they might go into a professional field. Here, it's always
cricket would do that.
Yeah, so here it's always quite different. There's a government incentive to develop a sport. They go out and scout people, and they have professional schools that are set up for that sport, and those kids are trained up as athletes from young. They do minimal amounts of school learning, and most of their time is spent training as athletes. And Sanda was like that, and then they'll have provincial competition and national competition. That's their cycle. That's what they're going through. They'll get a salary, and Sanda was like that too. But there comes a point when you're finished on the team, and then what? There used to be a King of Sanda kind of tournament or league here in China. That's gone. It hasn't happened for a long time. So where are these guys gonna go? So MMA is always, since the UFC, and it's become an avenue that people have realized you can do you can have a professional circuit, either domestically or growing into internationally, and you can make your money from that. So it's given a lot of opportunities, firstly to people that were Sanda athletes, but secondly, I think a lot of athletes are going directly into that now. Young people are going they're not going to go through Sanda first and then, because if a Sanda guys like Zhang Weili and them, they have to start learning grappling and other skills that they don't actually focus on in their Sanda training. So it's growing. From a financial point of view, it's also the main reason, but it's growing. Yeah.
You've mentioned already that you're involved in the Wu Shu Federation side of things. So, am I right in thinking that was something you were involved with, but not anymore?
So, that's I'll give you a basic background on that. As I mentioned,
it might be a long story.
It might be. Let's see how it goes. It's a horse I've kicked to death. But anyway, I started with traditional Chinese martial arts as a teenager, and from then, I met a teacher who had connections and was teaching also competitive sport wushu. I mean, it was the era of Jet Li movies, like the first Once Upon a Time in China and all of those, and then the first little inklings of this thing called, wushu as a sport, and Jet Li was an athlete. So I wanted to learn and get involved in that, and there was a teacher, and I started doing basically the first generation of competitive wushu forms and things like that. That's the generation that I was learning, and it grew from there because I was training hard. I moved into the school, so I moved into the school and I was training every single day, and that was what I wanted to really pursue. I wanted to just train martial arts. It's been something that I've done for all my life, but it was something I really wanted to pursue wholeheartedly. And I was training in these what you'd consider a high-level competitive format of wushu, but there was no one else. And there was in South Africa where I was, there was no affiliation to the international body, so there was no opportunity to go and compete. So I had started that as well. While being an athlete, I'd started moving into the direction of forming a national federation to start things getting connected with the international group, so we could start competing and doing things like that, both Sandai and Taoru. And it grew from there. So I was both an athlete, and then I started learning, as an athlete you learn the rules, you got to learn how the officiation works, I became a judge in 2004, and from there I became a technical committee member after being an international judge for quite a few years and getting some of the results that I did in the examinations and judging at competitions. In 2011 I was appointed to the technical committee of the International Federation. I had just moved to Beijing permanently roughly 2009, so I was still involved in judging at that point, but I had been living in China and training with my teacher for a few years already. And then they were trying to get, I don't know if you recall, there was the Olympic bid, and Wushu was shortlisted as one of the 8 sports in around 2012. They were going to cut wrestling out, which was the most insane thing I'd ever heard.
I remember the fuss about that as well.
Yeah, so they had 8 sports that were shortlisted for contention to become a new sport, and Wushu was one of them. And wrestling was also on the list to come back in, so it's kind of a no-brainer what was going to happen there. But we went through the process, and I was contacted at that point to be a technical representative for the International Wushu Federation at these presentations. So all the technical side of things, the judging side of things, that was my job to deal with the IOC. And then they opened an office in Beijing, a full-time office for the International Federation. Prior to that, the Chinese Wushu Association, the national federation here, was basically the holder of the International Federation's office. So it was an international federation, but it was simply just the Chinese Wushu Association, And a couple of years into, around 2013, 2014, the International Federation wanted to make an independent office here, and they wanted a technical an event manager. So that was when I started working with them even more. I did my thing. I was both a technical committee member and international judge, as well as their technical manager. And we did. I don't want to get into the details of the Olympic bid. Everybody knows what happened. Wrestling got put back in. That was kind of a no-brainer. And I carried on focusing on the development of the International Wushu Federation's side of things, trying to plug holes that had existed there for many years, technically and event-wise. There was a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask: have they given up trying to get Wushu into the Olympics now, or is it an ongoing sort of campaign?
They can't say that they give up. No federation can say, "Oh well, we're over that."
Yeah.
Because that's the carrot they've got to hold in everybody's face, and to say, "Oh, we're doing something. We're going to get into the Olympics. We're trying to get into the Olympics." And but the reality is,
because
it's not really going to happen as is. We saw what happened with karate in Tokyo, right? I mean, I actually presented to
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I presented to the Tokyo 2020 Commission, I think it was 2015, because once we failed to become an official sport, everybody did. Wrestling got put back in, right? Then there was the new kind of, I think Thomas Bach had it. I think it was called Agenda 2020, which was some new rules that the IOC put in. I'm getting I'm getting really deep into sports politics for you now. So anyway, Agenda 2020 was the idea that the host could include actual medaling events in an edition of the Olympic Games. And there was also the idea that they don't want to increase or decrease sports, but they could, and medal counts, but they could play with those events wise. So decrease some events from this sport and add a special event for this. So Tokyo had the option to add a single sport, as have subsequent Olympic hosts, as a special kind of event for that edition. So karate obviously made it into Tokyo 2020. I don't even know why we went through the process of presenting to them. I mean, what are they going to choose? Wu Shu over karate at the Olympics being held in Japan?
Yeah, in Tokyo. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, some of the I watched some of the karate. I don't know. Did you manage to watch some of it?
I did.
Yeah. So they have a a kata competition.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre to someone who doesn't do karate. You compare it to the wushu forms, which are spectacular. I couldn't do that in a million years. I got no way of approaching that.
Yeah.
And then the kata forms are sort of slow and not as athletic.
Yeah.
That's confusing. And then also they had the sparring, which I quite enjoyed some of the sparring. I quite liked it. But they had the ridiculous situation where Tarek Hamadi was about to win Saudi Arabia's first gold medal, and he kicked his opponent too hard, knocked him out, and they disqualified him.
I saw.
So that's got everyone up in arms.
I'll be frank with you. I've one of the reasons and my departure from the International Federation was a clash in terms of many things, but the key clash for me was the direction the sport was going, the problems that it had, and the overall idea of what it should be doing for the future. There are just too many issues there that I was trying to, in some ways, pull back to some semblance of sanity. Because, I mean, as an outside viewer, you've just kind of said a few things that are quite pertinent. One, it's spectacular to watch wushu forms, right? So there's that. And then the other side that you said was you could never do that. Well, most people can't do that, right? So. But how many people are doing Chinese martial arts on the planet? And are we really representing the actual Chinese martial arts? Or have we taken the name Wushu and invented something that is so far out there that and that is a problem. So for me, it was kind of like, how do you pull it back, right? And karate, in some senses, actually has that. They've always had that. They have a much better structure in that regard. And actually, I looked at their structure and their format as a really good example of generally how a martial art could run a sport. So karate has kata and kumite, obviously, but the kata, even though one could argue from a traditional point of view, a lot of the expression, timing, there's a lot of drama in the way that they do their kata. There's a lot of showmanship. Yeah, there's a lot of showmanship. But from a very primitive point of view, the athletes are doing karate. I mean, whether you want to admit it or not, but we could argue about semantics. I'm not a karate expert. But they have a list of kata that they're allowed to choose from, right?
Yeah.
And those lists of kata are agreed by the powers that be as representative kata forms from the different styles of karate. And, it's something that you could somewhat, as a lay karate person or a hobbyist, identify. I know that form. She's doing it slightly differently, but in general, that's the form. Well, you can't do that with wushu.
No, you can't. But I mean, as a cultural thing, yes, karate, absolutely. It's got its own culture and it's presenting something cultural. But is that a sport?
Yeah,
that's the question I'd have.
The second issue, and this has been a long time in the making, it's somebody like myself who's gone through the process of being an athlete, doing wushu taolu, being in love with it while I was young, destroying my knees through training, having three knee surgeries.
And then starting jiu-jitsu. I mean, most people have their knee surgeries after starting jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, true. But, I kind of came full circle back to where I started, because I started with traditional Chinese martial arts and came back to traditional Chinese martial arts with different eyes, though, with completely different eyes. And realizing, well, this is something really special, and it's kind of not there. It's not in the sports side of things. It's not in Wu Shu anymore. So, it's a very hard balance, but through my experience, honestly, between you and me and whoever's listening, I don't think...
No one's listening, don't worry.
I don't think performance of any sport should be a competitive thing. I mean, it's so subjective. Definitely with the martial arts. It's so hard to do that fairly and in a way that's going to be healthy for a long time. That doesn't get corrupted through the nature of human beings and the nature of, okay, now you're an Olympic sport. There's going to be, you're going to have the same problems that almost every martial art does in the Olympics if you're going to do performance-based medals. So it becomes something totally different to the original outset. The whole... the spirit and the drive behind what you're doing changes, then the art will change, then people will find ways to manipulate it left, right, and center. So it becomes... Not to say that you can't do that with combat, but it's a lot more difficult to do that with a combat event, So
It's normally more definitive with combat, isn't it? Where you can tell who won.
Exactly. So...
Unless it's karate kumite, in which case... The guy that's unconscious actually won.
Well, that's the funny thing about I started with karate as well when I was young. My family has a strong karate background, and I don't know if you've seen the older JKA sparring formats, like from the 80s and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
It's different.
Well, they were knocking each other out more, from what I could see.
I mean, on paper, they're supposed to be controlled, and it's bare knuckle, but they're supposed to be controlled. But they were literally... That was very martial. That was very...
Yeah.
It was very...
Yeah, it was.
They need to go back to something like that, and...
Well, they have got a combat karate format now that's doing competitions.
I saw that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're any good or what. I haven't really watched much of it, so I don't know.
Well, we're living in the age post UFC 1. It's going to be very hard now. It's going to be very hard now.
Yeah. I guess the problem is once they do like a more I don't want to say more martial form of karate combat, but if they're allowing harder strikes, and punches and kicks to the head, then why don't you just do MMA? Is the question that pops up.
Exactly.
What makes this karate anymore?
So this is the issue now, right? I mean, like I said, you can block out the sun only for so long before, it becomes a fruitless effort. And this is idea of going full circle is really what's happened with MMA. Whether people... I don't like the culture of MMA. For me, a lot of the personalities, the demeanor, etc. It's not how I would do. I would conduct myself. It is what it is, but that aside, the actual format of MMA is kind of coming full circle to what we had way back in ancient Greece. And maybe there were people that had the same conversation we just had about, how are we going to make this combat sport? And this guy's performance it's all fluff, and I don't think he can fight. And no, but this guy, if the rules allowed me to choke you on the floor, I'd kill you. And your rules only allow me to do boxing. So that's all right. So let's make an event where we can do everything. And once you've done that, it's very hard to say, well, I'm going to do a toned down version and be entertained and find a purpose in it. It's very hard. So I don't know what the answer is.
It reminds me a lot of that, is it combat jiu-jitsu, where they allow you to slap each other at the same time as rolling. And to me, it just looks ridiculous. I mean, I just don't get it.
Well, didn't the Gracies didn't do some gimped out version of combat in Brazil? They trained jiu-jitsu and then they entered vale tudo, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I think as time goes on, the inclination is to drift towards more freedom in combat, where anything goes, and obviously within safety concerns and restraints. But for the most part, people are gonna tend to want to go towards a format that allows you to do whatever, and then we can all just compete on this equal playing field. You can come from karate, I can come from sambo, this guy can come from boxing. If you've got the goods, you're gonna win. If you don't have the goods, you're gonna lose. That's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could argue that it's hard to get into MMA if you're a Wing Chun guy and you want to represent Wing Chun in MMA. You're gonna struggle to find a promoter who will let you do that, because maybe you're going to go into the ring and not be exciting, because you're not going to be doing flying side kicks. You're not going to be, doing all the things they're looking for. I think I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think the odds are stacked against you doing that type of thing. They tend to check out the competitors before they let them in the ring, and if they don't look a certain way, I guess they don't get the chance.
I think it depends. I think there's a lot of amateur organizations that just kind of, you want to fight, you fight, So, and if you win, they're gonna keep fighting. They're gonna keep allowing you to fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you start winning using, say, Wing Chun, then people are obviously you're gonna build a reputation, and it would grow in a sort of a grassroots way, wouldn't it?
Mm.
But I don't know. I just don't think it's this completely open playing field. I think it's harder to get into it if you wanted to be like a judo specialist or something else. People get recommended by their coaches to go into these competitions, and if a judo guy goes in and doesn't throw a single kick and then gets his leg kicked to bits, someone's got to come back and go, well, why did you send me that guy? He can't even kick. And then you might end up in that sort of conversation. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, it could be.
But like you say, it's the best format we've ever had, really, for like a as limited rules as possible sort of competition.
Right.
Although they do need to sort out the gloves, I think, with the eye pokes. That's becoming a problem.
Well, you're always going to have that give and take, that yin and yang there between having unrestricted gloves and having eye pokes and other safety issues.
Yeah, exactly. And also, because there are rules, people play within the rules, whereas you don't get immediately disqualified for an eye poke, so you can probably do a couple and get away with it, I mean, even some of the big names, John Jones was, he's still fighting technically, but he hasn't fought for a while. But he was just notorious for, there'd be at least one eye poke at some point in one of his fights.
Always. Always.
Yeah.
I bet you the guys that claim super secret techniques along with eye pokes and groin strikes are loving this part of the conversation. So
we've been doing this for years. Yeah.
You see, it's deadly.
It's deadly. Yeah. It's deadly when the other guy isn't expecting you to do them. Well, that's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah. The issue is, I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to change, and there's a lot of things that people are going to object to, and they're going to say it's limiting or whatever, even down to the fact that rounds exist, and then people learn to train for maximum efficacy within rounds and that format. And
made jiu-jitsu very hard to do, didn't it? To get submissions within a 5-minute round.
Exactly. So one side will say it's good, one side will say it's limiting their ability to use their skills. So look, you're not gonna make everyone happy unless we just say, right, you two fight until one of you is dead, and we can't do that. We can't do that. So.
Nobody wants to see that either. I mean, I like MMA on one hand. On the other hand, I'm kind of revolted by it, especially when it ends up in a complete beatdown and the referee is slow stopping the fight.
Yeah.
And you're watching someone just, they went unconscious already and they're still being hit. Yeah. All that kind of stuff is, and like you say, the culture of it, like the Conor McGregor sort of shouting out at people, being very disrespectful. But then at the same time, you get certain characters within MMA who, just seem to exhibit martial virtue in a way that a lot of other people talk about but don't actually do.
GSP.
Yeah.
Like GSP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He never slagged anyone off or anything, did he?
No, he didn't, and he always conducted himself very honorably. But did he make as much money as Conor McGregor? So this is the problem that we have, you know. So, and that's partially the same reason. And it's connected, but it's not connected. It's sports in the Olympics. So the prestige and the money and all of the things that happen as they get to become Olympic sports, but then they have to abide by certain required outcomes, etc., and change their sports. So, you know, these kind of things always impede and change things. So
yeah, I mean, nobody likes what being Olympic did to judo, do they? But
yeah,
you're not allowed to grab the pants at all now, so that's all the traditional wrestling type moves of single legs and double legs are all banned,
right.
And now those don't get taught in judo clubs. They do get taught in some, but obviously they're not emphasized anymore, and eventually over time they'll just slip away.
Well, I don't know if you heard that Muay Thai just got officially full recognition from the IOC. This happened now.
Oh, did it?
At the session in Tokyo.
That's going to make Taekwondo look bad, isn't it?
Well, this is the issue. Like, what's going to happen to Muay Thai as they start to become more Olympic? And if they get into the Olympics, what will happen to them too, you know? So there's all of these things that... Can you imagine the IOC allowing Thai rules with elbows and people getting bloodied up like that with cuts all over them?
No,
I highly
can't
doubt
imagine
it.
blood, no.
So if the prestige of getting an Olympic gold medal means that all changes, which changes the way that you're training, is Muay Thai going to stay the same? Are people still going to focus on Thai boxing the way that they used to, or are they going to just simply change to become Olympic champions? You know, all of these things have an effect. All of these things have an effect.
It's one of the reasons I really don't want Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to ever get into the Olympics, because can you imagine what they'll do to it?
Who knows?
One thing I thought was, judo has a time limit for not being allowed to be on the floor. You know, you get stood up after so many seconds. I can imagine if Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu got into the Olympics, they'd swap it round, so you can't stand up for more than 20 seconds and try for takedowns. You've got 20 seconds to try for takedowns, and you both have to sit down.
To be
that would just be
the butt scooting world championships.
Exactly. It'll just turn into a butt scooting competition. It'll just be crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I mean, martial arts has always been a personal thing, and I'm not going to slate competition, because I find value in the grinding iron against iron, but at the same time there are problems if you get overtly, invested in that. So, this is the balance that people have to maintain with your martial art training. I do think, though, with Chinese martial arts, whether it's big competitions or just within schools, there are avenues to do combat formats that aim at developing students, and developing their martial skills. And you don't necessarily need a world body for that. You really don't. So, and for me, that's the value, and that's what I see as a true, it's something that your students will truly benefit from, even if it's just within your school or with a couple of schools, that you develop these formats that help your students to develop real applicable skills. Then that's great. Olympics, Schmolympics, whatever, I don't really care. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we've come to a natural conclusion to our little talk.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your training, if I could, for a couple of seconds. What do you focus most of your time on these days?
My personal training is all Chinese, so hate to say it, but Qigong.
Okay.
So, in the morning I'll do my Patuan Shin, Jamjong, that kind of stuff, and then I do the Tai Chi form 3 times. And then I normally pick something out of Xing Yi, like an animal.
Okay.
I really enjoy monkey, so...
Really?
I do that. Yeah, I really like it.
I mean, there's aspects of monkey that I like. I really like the savageness and the brutality of monkey, but it's never been one of the animals that I felt a great affinity for.
It's a nimble animal, and my jiu-jitsu style is quite nimble.
Okay.
So it feels connected to me, to my guard passing. So
I see.
I quite like to pass guard a bit like the Rafa Mendes style. Not that I'm anywhere near his level. Obviously, he's, you know, some sort of jiu-jitsu god. But the way he passes guard is he just does. It's quite fast. There's lots of bashing the legs out of the way, getting into leg drags, and quick toreandos, rather than like a pressure passer.
Right.
I quite like that approach, but I'm quite bulky for my height. So if I can get in on a pressure pass, I'll take it, definitely.
I see.
I'm not going to like not do it. But I aspire to the nimble quickness, side to side, you know, trying to almost confusing the person, because monkey's quite tricksy, isn't it?
It is totally tricky.
You know, so it's that aspect, and then for me, there's some sort of connection between the sort of relaxed nimbleness of monkey and the sort of way I like to play jiu-jitsu. My jiu-jitsu superpower, if I had one, is holding people down. So that's not very nimble at all. It's just pressure and changing angles so they can't get up.
Right.
But you've got to pass guard to do that. So I've spent quite a lot of time working on a style that's, you know, I go from guard, sweep, pass guard, get on top, stay on top.
Oh, so you prefer you're not somebody who likes to attack from the guard.
I really love an omoplata, but it's like my only. Oh, everything else I do is sweeps, really.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm really comfortable. Good. I'm really comfortable sweeping and then passing guard. That's my kind of ideal sort of, I guess, not format, or that's my ideal strategy.
I see. Yeah, monkey. I've been actually writing quite a lot about monkey lately, because I've been translating a whole bunch of old texts in this book for the last bloody 7 years. That's still not finished. But monkey. I mean, really, it is a cunning, and it is very deceptive, but it's really cruel. I mean, if people understand a lot of the aspects of monkey, it's a very cruel. It's one of Xing Yi's more cruel animals. If we can say it that way. So, but me,
it doesn't have any compassion, does it?
No, not at all. Really, not at all. Yeah, but for me, I my animals that I find the most affinity are for a horse, bear, things like that. But I guess it's different for everyone, and it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're a sort of a fairly big guy, aren't you? Like and you're well muscled, shall we say? I can see a horse being perfect for that sort of physique.
And
bear too.
It's a very good feeling when you to punch somebody directly in the face with horse. I don't know. There's something. There's something gratifying about it.
Yeah, I've got a friend called Mike who really likes horse.
Okay.
And he trained a lot of Muay Thai actually recently, and he said that the thing that he would catch people with in sparring was horse. It would catch them out.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yeah, it's a... Look, I mean, I also think, and I've seen this with my teacher too, that as we go through life, we'll find affinity for differing animals as we ourselves get older and change and things too. So that's the beauty, I think, of those 12 animals, is that there's not only something for everyone, but there's something for every stage in your life as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and even seasonally as well, I find I do different things in cold winter months to different things in the hot summer. I mean, for me, monkey's more of it's summertime here now, so it's more of a sunshiny, I don't know, jumping around outside type activity.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've got no logic for why. It just appeals to me that way.
But for sure, the seasons affect you also energetically. I mean, I never believed this until I when I first started living here, and my teacher would also say to me, oh, different things affect your body in different seasons. And I'd be like, all this talk of based on traditional Chinese medicine ideas, I never believed it until I actually started, experiencing it myself. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. But, things like they call in Chinese 上火. 上火means that your fire is going up. right? And they talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
this happening at specific times of the year and how it manifests in your body, like whether it be, pain here or a swollen gum there or something like this. And true as Bob, over time, certain things would occur in exactly those times to me. And anyway, it's interesting, but for sure the seasons have an effect on your body overall. So we train differently in summer, winter, spring, and autumn ourselves. So yeah, that's true.
But I do find for recovery from jiu-jitsu is the main thing. Tai Chi is fantastic. Really, really good for all those sore joints and all that,
for sure.
all the general wear and tear that you get from training jiu-jitsu. Tai Chi really, I think it. I seem to do a lot better than most of my contemporaries when it comes to being old and still doing jiu-jitsu. And I'm convinced it's down to the Chinese stuff I do.
Well, I agree completely. Most of the people that don't know me when they train with me, whether they roll with me or they train with me in jiu-jitsu, when they actually find out my age, most of them are shocked. So
Yeah, I've had that as well.
And
I went to a seminar, but I went to a seminar with the famous guy who broke his arm with Roger Gracie, Tedere.
Oh, yeah,
Tedere, yeah. He famously broke his arm and still won the match.
Yeah, he ran away with a broken arm, and the time ran off.
Yeah, he did run away
for
the last 2 minutes, didn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, which I guess makes a mockery of the rules again. But I went to his seminar of his, and there were some other black belts there, and then he just made everyone roll with each other, and I'd kind of roll with like the other black belts there, and one of them went, "You're 49? What do you mean you're 49? I thought you were like 35."
Well, this is the thing. Haven't you noticed there's this big push now within jiu-jitsu, like yoga for BJJ and recovery for BJJ? And I was like, yeah, we call this all the stuff, the supplemental stuff we do in Chinese martial arts. It's like all in one,
Yeah.
It's there, and I mean, I don't do Tai Chi. I have the stuff that we do in Xing Yi and Bagua. In fact, my knees were in such bad state when I first started training with my teacher that a lot of the stuff he showed me is what has rehabbed my knees up until today. And I remember even Andrea, my big sister, she had a problem with I think sciatica or some other issues too. At some point in her life, because she also did sport Wu Shu when she was in this Beijing Sports University way back when. And she also said that the circle walking healed a lot of her problems that she had.
Yeah, I've heard
joint problems. And I felt this myself. So, this is why, apart from the fact that I love the arts of Xing Yi and Bagua, that I strictly do them on a very regular basis, is simply because of the benefits it's got for maintenance, health maintenance, and physical condition maintenance. So it's there. And recovery, of course.
Yeah.
It's there.
Bizarrely, I've never been able to get into Bagua. In theory, it should be exactly the sort of thing I like, because I like the monkey style of Xing Yi, which is the complicated stuff. I like walking around in a circle. I do that, playing. I just do monkey around in a circle quite often. But for some reason, it's never stuck with me. Trying to learn Bagua, it's just I don't know what it is. There's just something about it that doesn't quite click for me.
Well, I don't know.
It might be because I've got.
I don't quite agree with a lot of people trying to describe Bagua as overtly complicated. It isn't actually overtly complicated. I mean, there might be aspects of the system that seem to be, highly. There's a lot of movements and things going on, but really the core. For example, I do Liang Sao Bagua. The core of our system would be called Ding Shi Ba Zhang, which are the 8 fixed posture palms. So that's 8 orientations or positions that you hold with your upper body and you walk the circle, and you do that in both directions. But that's like Santi Shi with stepping, right? So that's fixed, and for me, I find that really develops a lot of aspects that are required in the body. And then the next thing, of course, is Lao Ba Zhang, which are the 8 mother palms, and they're not overtly complicated either. I mean, Okay, they're not as simple as Pi Chuan, Zuan Chuan, Beng Chuan in terms of just 1, 1, 1, 1. They're sometimes a little bit more complicated. But I remember even the older my teacher's generation, and what he would say from Li Ziming. Li Ziming would say, you have to do the static palms and the mother palms. You can kind of ignore the other stuff if you don't have time every day, but the static palms and the mother palms, and you'll get almost everything that you need to out of Bagua, and that's true. So if you're seeing 6 million techniques as the heart of Bagua, honestly, that's not it. And for me, that's definitely not my experience.
I was thinking more about the spirally circular nature of things rather than the number of techniques, like the the sort of complex 3D movement.
Right.
Because there's turning, there's spiraling, and then there's turning back, and then round again. And I mean, it looks beautiful. I really like the aesthetic of it. I mean, it does definitely appeal to me, but for some reason, I've never gravitated towards it. And I think it's because I've got the Tai Chi on one side and I've got the Xing Yi on the other, and Bagua looks like a bit of sort of both things. And every time I try and do it, I kind of think, well, I could just be doing Tai Chi, or I could just be doing Xing Yi,
Sure.
And like everyone else, I've got a job and jiu-jitsu to do at the same time, and it's all just too much, really. There's only so many things you can fit in your life, really.
Stop sleeping. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I need to stop.
Well, yeah, I mean, possibly it could be because you do Tai Chi too, and there might be a lot of overlap there. So I suppose that's probably it. But yeah, I found there's certain things in Bagua that we don't do in Xing Yi, although then you find that you do them, but in different ways. But they're just emphasized differently. Like with Bagua, we're really twisting the root. I mean, it's and when I say the root, I don't just mean your feet. I mean even the root of each limb. And if I could describe Bagua in a very simplistic way, it would be that basis of twisting the root as much as possible, and then maintaining certain things from there. So, yeah, I could see how that might be because of your Tai Chi practice that you see it kind of obsolete. Yeah.
Maybe, but Tai Chi is not particularly twisty in that way.
No, it's not. I mean, that aspect, no. So, but other aspects possibly. What style of Tai Chi do you do? You do Yang style, right?
It's a Yang style, but it's not the Yang Cheng Fu Yang style. It's the one that comes from Yu Chang, who taught it in Hong Kong. So it's come out of Hong Kong, and it had some influence from Sun Lutang.
Right.
A lot of people used to think it was Sun style before Sun style was widely accessible. People thought this version of Yang was Sun style because Sun Lutang was kind of involved with Yu Chang in its creation, but it's not Sun style. It's Yang style, but there are bits where we put the feet together like you do in Sun style. Okay. So it's sort of halfway between Yang Cheng Fu and Sun style, which are very different styles. So if you imagine halfway between, you've got, it basically looks like Yang style, but there's a lot of postures where we step up.
Like so you do a follow-in step. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Not necessarily on the strikes. The strikes are still kind of like in a bow stance, but like in brush knee, where the hands kind of go backwards in 2 circles before you do the push. As our hands go backwards in 2 circles, we step up with a following step, and then we step again to do the brush knee and push. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's got nimble footwork, but it also has all the kind of classic Yang style postures in it. It's not as large frame as Yang Cheng Fu style, so we don't have a really long stance. It's just sort of medium.
So you think that stepping method was because of the influence or some influence from Sun Lutang or Xing Yi?
I think it's probably from Sun Lutang's Tai Chi style, because his Tai Chi style it's very follow step based. Yeah. I don't detect any Xing Yi influence in our Yang in the Tai Chi form, really.
I see.
It definitely feels more like Sun Lutang had an influence on a Yang style.
Right.
It's meant to have, in the lineage is meant to have come from Cheng Fu's father. So it was Yang Jianhao who taught Who's the Wudang sword guy?
Oh, Li Jinglin.
Li Jinglin, yes. So Yang Zhenhao teaches Li Jinglin, who then teaches Kuyu Chang and Sun Lu Tang, and they all at this point it all becomes part of that Koshu movement, and they're all sort of teaching together, as a group, and they're all influencing each other, and it comes out of that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting.
So it's hard to say exactly whose it is.
You know, I spoke to, when I look at Sun Lu Tang's Sun style Tai Chi, I heavily see that it's like influenced by his Xing Yi background, and but I went down to Guangping, you know what they call where Guangping Tai Chi comes from, etc. And I went down, that's Yang Luchan's hometown. But I went to go visit Wu style people there, and you know, Sun Lu Tang learned Wu style before he created his Sun style Tai Chi. And okay, it was a short period of time, but I mean, he was quite a well developed martial artist by that point. So when I looked at it, I always thought, you know, he's just kind of made Tai Chi based on Xing Yi. But when I spoke to a few Wu style people, they would show me the Wu style equivalent of a lot of the techniques that are in the Sun style form, and you can see that it's a direct connection to that for a very big part. So
even that follow steps there in the Wu style. It's hard to say that he got it out of Xing Yi, really, because it was already there. And so maybe the follow step in our style was what was there before Yang Chengfu took it out. Who knows? I mean, it's just impossible to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe Sun Lu Tang put it back in. It's impossible to know, isn't it?
That's exactly it. So, you know, me looking at it with my Xing Yi eyes, you know, I'm quick to judge. But when I spoke to those Wu style people, and then they showed me like from Wu style without Sun Lu Tang, it's got many of those aspects already existing there. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, and our Tai Chi style. So I got my Tai Chi style from my Sifu Raymond Rand, who learned from Master Lam Kam Chuen, who did the TV series Stand Like a Tree back in the 90s, I think. So he had a little. It's on YouTube now. You can. Oh, is it?
You can watch the. Yeah. It's actually really good.
Yeah, okay, I'll watch it.
It's just
now that it's on YouTube.
Basic Jam Jong, you know. But his attitude's so encouraging. Like he's like, don't just sit to watch. Get up and try it. You know, just stand. You know, it's all like that. I mean, you know, my teacher tells me stories of training with him back in the 80s, and it was hardcore martial arts. But he's so lovely and friendly on this, you know, in his modern sort of, you know, versions of these things. But yeah, it was like, you know, they used to do heavy combat training. I used to make them train staff pole with no protective gear. And you just imagine being hit on your knuckles repeatedly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was just thinking
you're not allowed to wear gloves. Yeah. So there was no gloves, no helmets, no eye protection, nothing. And it was like, oh my goodness, it just sounds horrendous. He's told me lots of stories about, you know, and then there was fighting outside Chinese supermarkets at night, and then people betting on it and all that kind of stuff. You know, different schools would fight each other.
Nice.
You know, and that was like no rules really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So it was like a really martial collection of arts that I learned. It was Tai Chi, but it was like on the martial side of Tai Chi. And we also obviously, it wasn't just Tai Chi. There's all sorts of other stuff sort of mixed in. There's Choi Li Fut.
Oh wow.
Which Buxing Choi Li Fut. I just get a message from my wife saying, your son is hungry, because I'm sitting in the dining room.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean,
we might have to wrap up.
Right, sure. I mean, it's going on longer than I thought you wanted it to go on. In any case, and we don't want your son. We don't want your son to be hungry, and I don't want your wife to single whip you either. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the doghouse now.
Anyway, we can do this again. I mean, this was good. It was good to chat.
Yeah, we could pick some more subjects for next time.
We did want to one day have a discussion about the difference or the area between style and format. So maybe we can do that one day.
Yeah, that sounds a bit more academic, doesn't it? But we can have a debate about when does a style become a style.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. We'll do that.
Okay, we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for doing
me.
it, Byron.
No problem. No problem. My pleasure. Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about the Tai Chi Notebook podcast at www.thetaichinotebook.com. You can support us by giving our podcast a positive review on iTunes and our page a like on Facebook. Just search for the Tai Chi Notebook to find us. Until next time, enjoy your training.